I want to mention to you again what Pastor Wes mentioned to you in the course of announcements, is that this Friday night we're going to have a praise and prayer night here. Now brace yourselves, and please try to restrain your applause appropriately. I'm not going to preach. I said restrain your applause, Ryan. Go to your room right now. Just go to your room. I'm not going to preach. And in order to do that, you have to keep me away from the microphone. But I promise to be a good boy. It's not a preaching service. It's just an evening where we sing praises to God. And toward the end of the evening, we're going to invite you to come forward that you may be anointed and prayed for, whatever the burdens of your heart are, or if you want to stand in proxy for someone who is sick, or if you are sick and you'd like for us to pray for you, we invite you to come. It's still going to be COVID season come Friday, so we'll have to kind of use our heads a little bit when we're bunching up here up front. But we can do that, can't we? You nod your heads like this if you're not going to say yes out loud. We can do that, can't? Okay, all right. But I want to ask you, would you please? Unless you've got some serious obligation on Friday night, would you come this Friday night and just join us in telling God how much we love Him, how much we appreciate Him, reminding ourselves and Him of His goodness, and then receive whatever it is that He has to give to us in return for our praises. That's this Friday night at 7 o'clock. Chris, why don't you come and join me? This is Reverend Chris Clemons. Would you welcome him this way? Chris is a dear brother in the Lord. He accepted our invitation to come and be our first Faith Promise speaker for our 2-weekend Faith Promise challenge that we have every year. If you're not familiar with Faith Promise, here's the basic idea, is that we recognize that the Scriptures call the people of God to 2 kinds of giving on a regular basis. That is, to give a tithe, 1/10 of everything that the Lord gives to us, we return to Him. And for many of us, if you give away 10% of your income, it puts you in need. And that's okay, because God has promised that He will then supply all of your needs according to His riches in Christ Jesus. And so there's this breathing in and breathing out kind of give and receive from the Lord in tithing. He also invites us out of gratitude to bring to Him generous offerings. The church over the years, Church of the Nazarene, has said we are so committed to the business of world mission that we call our people to both of those kinds of giving, and then we invite them into a third kind of giving, and that is that once a year we will focus on this business of world mission, of taking the gospel to every person in the world in their native language. And in order to do that, we have to send some missionaries to language school. We have to get transportation. We have to get visas into the parts of the world where you enter legally. And then we have to find ways to get into the places where they're telling us that we can't preach the gospel, because that's one of those times that we say obeying men isn't right. Jesus told us to take the gospel to everyone, and so we'll go. And so we have to use some creative ways to get into those places. And so Faith Promise is this practice in the Church of the Nazarene where we say, if we're going to call missionaries to go above and beyond, and to leave their families, to leave the comforts of this country, to go into places in the world where it isn't safe, then we join them in that kind of faith and faithfulness, and we ask God, what would you like for me and my family to give beyond our tithe and beyond our regular offerings? Lord, if you call us to something that seems crazy, we'll go there in faith with you. But you're going to have to supply the ability to give it. It really isn't about a dollar number. It's about listening to the Lord and seeing if He calls you to give to support missions in that way. Chris is an old pro at this because missions has had his heart forever and ever. As long as Chris has been following the Lord Jesus, he's been finding a way to go to all parts of the world to share the gospel. And then God called him to the edges of civilization, Pendleton, Oregon, right? You've been pastor in Pendleton for 14 years now. Mm-hmm. And Chris accepted this huge request from our district superintendent and the district advisory board. There's another church in Pilot Rock that didn't have a pastor, and a church that can't afford to call a pastor. And we asked Chris if he would go and preach. And he went and preached, and he kept doing it for so long, we just finally admitted that he's the pastor there. And so Chris and Carolyn pastored 2 churches on our district. And in addition to that, he is the missions president for the district. So all of the district projects that are organized, all of the fundraising, all of the trips that are taken all around the world, Chris is the person who leads that under the guidance of God's Holy Spirit. So he's a hero in the faith to me. Chris and Carolyn have become people that Laura and I love, and we look forward to spending time with them at district events and so forth. And I look up to him because every time that I've ever heard this man speak, any time that I've ever seen him do anything that puts a microphone in his face, he comes with a humility that is the hallmark of the presence of Jesus and of his Holy Spirit. And so he's the one that we believe the Lord has selected to speak to us this morning about Faith Promise. Can I pray his blessing upon you? Lord, thanks for my brother. Thank you for the way that he has been leading us already. There's folks in this church who have never seen Chris's face and never heard his name until today. But he's been leading us because he leads our district, Lord. There's one thing that I've learned about him. It's he'll go wherever you send him. Thank you for sending him to us today. Spirit, you live in his heart. It's abundantly clear. Now come upon him in power, like you did the preachers of old, that whatever came out of their mouths found its way to human hearts and changed them. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Is this all the way up, or can I raise it some more? Oh, good. Well, thank you very much, and good morning. I have to honestly say that most of my ministry opportunities, God has brought me in the back door all of the time. I've always felt that there was always somebody better that could be doing what I was doing, but either nobody wanted to, or God says, no, I'm still choosing you. I'm going to use some of the foolish things to confound the wise. And it's been a reminder to me all the way through my walk with the Lord that God is not looking for able people that he can make faithful. He's looking for faithful people that he will make able. And I appreciate the invitation here and for the hospitality that I have been shown. My wife and granddaughter were going to come with me. However, there was a death in her side of the family the past week, and so she had to go up to Spokane. But she really wanted to be here with me. I appreciate being able to go out to visit the H2A camp with Rob and Marlon yesterday at Mattawa. That was a real treat. It was one of the, what a privilege it is to have the opportunity to travel, to see how other people are living, and to see what God is doing in other places. It's a reminder to me that it's just not me, and it's just not what's going on in my little fishbowl. That God is raising up people and moving on hearts and doing incredible ministry all around the world. And one of the things that the Northwest District does, I'm sure you've heard about this, is our NMI chooses a project to focus on as a district so all of the churches can come together. We have our own little ministries, but we choose as a district to come together for a project that we can do somewhere. Generally, it's outside of the borders of the United States. And for the last 4 years, we were in southern Mexico in the Oaxaca district and ministered down there. We responded because of the 2017 earthquakes. And that was, so 4 years we spent down there. And this year, this past year, we felt it was time to change our focus, and God began to lead us. And we have chosen the Rio Grande Valley down in southern Texas, the southern Texas district of the Church of the Nazarene, which is right on the border of Texas and Mexico. There's quite a ministry opportunity that they see, a ministry need that they see down there. Over 90% of the population in the Rio Grande Valley speaks Spanish. And there's about almost 1.5 million people there, and there's a lot of ministry opportunities and ministry needs there. And so the South Texas District has an initiative to support and develop churches down there and to minister to the people that are now there. And so we are partnering with them for the next couple of years at least so our work and witness trips now are going to be domestic for a while. And we do have a work and witness trip planned for this June, July. If you want to know more about the district project and about the work and witness trip that's coming up, we have on the Church of the Nazarenes website, the Northwest District Nazarenes website is a page for missions. You click on missions and it'll give you information on the district project and what's going on down in southern Texas. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, we read where Jesus... Well, actually, let me read that. I could try to explain it, and it would take me just as long to read it, and it's better when God says it. I think his words are better. But in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, we read where Jesus is approached by an expert in the law. And this is where we receive from Jesus the parable of the Good Samaritan. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, beginning of verse 25. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" And the expert in the law replied, "Well, the one who had mercy on him." And Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." One of the things that I discover when I'm reading something in the New Testament, I do much other reading in the Old Testament, or I do any study into it, I discover that this is not just a principle that shows up in the Gospels or shows up in the New Testament, that it is, if it's of God, then you can find it all the way through the entire book. And when I read Jesus asking the question, or Jesus being asked the question, "Who is my neighbor?" and then he responds, I find that I myself need to ask myself every now and then, who is my neighbor? And what does it mean to love my neighbor? Now, we as a denomination believe that love is the driving force in the kingdom of God. And that's biblical. I mean, from Genesis to Revelation, this is a book about love. There's even a book within the book, which is called the Song of Solomon, that is devoted to speaking about passionate love between 2 people. Most famous verse in the Bible, perhaps, John 3:16, for God so loved the world. The shortest memory verse in the Bible, 1 John chapter 4:16, God is love. Matter of fact, that entire fourth chapter that John writes is a chapter that talks specifically about loving God and loving others. And even the stern Apostle Paul wrote an entire chapter to the Corinthian church about the supreme about the supreme value of love. And as I thought about our mission and I thought about our projects, I was drawn to these chapters and I was drawn to this word, love. It's the most personal word in the human language. And I also reflected on how love is embedded in our Wesleyan view of theology. And how because of that, we define ourselves as Nazarenes. We define ourselves as Christian and holiness and missional. Now, that's not three parts of who we are. It is who we are. To be Christian is to be holy, to be set apart, to live a life of overcoming temptation, a life that reflects the Spirit of Christ that is within us. And to be Christian is to take the good news of the availability and the necessity of this life, to take that good news to others, and to proclaim by words and deeds what the Apostle Paul says deserves full acceptance when he says, Christ Jesus came into this world to save sinners. And for that very reason, I was shown mercy, so that in me, the worst of sinners, Christ Jesus might display his unlimited patience as an example for those who would believe on him and receive eternal life. His mercy, his unlimited patience, his offer of eternal life is a direct extension of his love. Christ was sent into this world to save sinners and to make them holy. So we have been delivered, we have been saved, we have been transformed, and now he sends us, and so we go for this reason, that we might display the unlimited patience, the unlimited love, the unlimited mercy of God. We are his examples. We are his witnesses of what he has done for us and what he will do for whosoever believes. Which is why it is so important that we never forget that it's not just the message of the gospel the Holy Spirit uses to inform and awaken and draw people to himself, but it is also the messenger. Our words must bear witness of what we have seen and heard, and we must testify to what God has done for us. But our lives must also be a witness that people can observe. As God informs us through the Apostle Paul, our lives are on display to the world, and we are on display for a reason, which is why we should walk in a manner that is worthy of our Lord. John tells us that if anyone is in Christ, they must live as Jesus lived. They must walk as Jesus walked. We must be transformed, and we must live as if we were transformed. A transformed life must be on display as we proclaim to the world the real hope of a transformed life is available for all humanity. One of the purposes of our mission endeavors, our mission trips, is to encourage the church and encourage people that it's not just a North American church, that God is a God of the world and God is the God of the universe, and that he can transform anybody. He wants to transform anybody. The Opportunity is available for anybody, and those same people then can then be raised up and go out and proclaim that same gospel. I've had a privilege of going on numerous mission trips to various parts of the world for probably over 35 years. And before almost every trip, I would always have someone caution me. It might be a family member, might be a friend, might even be someone in the church. And they'd say, Chris, maybe now is not a good idea to make this trip. Maybe it's not a good idea to make this trip at this time or to this place because of the civil unrest that's taking place, or going to where there's an unfriendly government, or there's sickness, or there's disease, or there's a natural disaster that has taken place, or it's not a safe place. Maybe you should wait until a better time. Maybe you should wait until it's safer. And besides all that, how can you afford to keep going on all of these trips? And it was a sacrifice. And there almost always was a risk. But at the same time, there was always this heartfelt need to go, to proclaim the gospel, to encourage the church and to remind them that they are not alone. There is also this need that I have to experience conditions that other people are living under, to know by experience in some small way how other people live, how other people can come to God in the place that they are at. It was about 30 years ago, I was living in a country in Eastern Europe, and I'd spent 3 months over there, and I came back home, and I wanted to go back. So I came back home, I quit my job, I sold my house, and I planned to go back there and live. And, it's one thing to visit a place for a couple of weeks, but it's another thing to actually live for an extended period of time. There's a lot more challenges. And anyway, after I'd been there for a few months, and I'd fallen in love with these people. That's why I wanted to go. I'd fallen in love with these people. I fell in love with their culture. And in spite of the expense, in spite of the commitment, in spite of the challenges, I just wanted to go, and I believed it was of God to go. But after a couple of months, things started to get kind of hard. With my family, with just everything, with the finances, with trying to conduct business, trying to conduct ministry day after day, week after week. And there was a supermarket that was maybe a mile away, and I'd walk to the supermarket every couple of weeks to pick up some items, and I'd purchase them there. I wasn't really good with the language, but I knew just enough to buy and sell and a little bit to get by. But one week I was at the supermarket, and I discovered they had for sale some heavy-duty shopping bags. And I thought, now that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that earlier? I'll buy these shopping bags, and then I can pack all my stuff home a lot easier. And so I did that. A couple of weeks later, it was time to go to the store again, so I rolled up those shopping bags, and I headed back to the supermarket, and I bought my stuff, and I put it on the counter, and I had my bags under my arm, and the gal's ringing everything up, and then she looks, and she rings up those bags that are under my arm. And I tried to say, oh, no, wait a minute. I already bought these last time I was here. I don't want to pay for them again. And she says, no, I know you just bought that. No, I didn't. I walked in the store with them. So she turns and hollers over at the greeter. They had a greeter at their door also, and she hollers over at the greeter. I knew what she was asking him. Did this clown bring these bags in here, or is he trying to pull something on me? And the gal looks over with an angry face and says, he didn't bring those in. And so she just kind of goes to ring them up, and boy, that made me angry. I mean, I just burned, and I wished I knew the language a lot better, because I wanted to dress down her and everybody else in that store right then. All of the stress and all of the everything, and I thought, good grief, I sold my house. I quit my job. I traveled over here. I'm going through all of this stuff, and here I'm being accused of trying to shoplift a couple of bags that aren't worth but a few pennies. And it bothered me for weeks. And it took a couple of weeks for God to finally get through to me, to remind me why I was there. And when I think of that experience, I think of what Paul wrote to Titus. Paul left Titus in Crete. He was to pastor a church to those people. And I could imagine Titus perhaps after a while starting to think, what did I get myself into? And perhaps wrote a letter to Paul and expressing himself. I'm just kind of adding all that into that because when I read in the first chapter of Paul's letter to Titus, Paul says, I know the Cretans are liars. I know they're lazy and sinful, but this is why I left you there. And then when he gets to chapter 3, I read Paul saying, at one time we too were foolish. We too were deceived. We too were enslaved by all kinds of passions and pleasures and malice and envy and being hated and hating one another. But when the kindness and love of God our Savior appeared, he saved us. Not because of righteous things that we had done, but because of his mercy. And I want you to stress these things. The kindness and love of God has appeared to make us right, to make us be like him. And he wants to put us on display before an angry and a dishonest and a self-centered world, a people who have been transformed by love, a people who can be then a channel for his patience and for his love. He told Titus, he said, there were people out there who claim to know God, but by their actions they deny him. And sadly, I have seen people in my 40 plus years as a Christian that by their actions I find their faith questionable. And as I read the New Testament, I read of Jesus and Paul and Titus and Timothy, and they lived among people, and they encountered strong opinions from people, and there was debates going on, and there was differences among people, differences with politics and religion and race and even gender. And although those things are not unimportant, too easily they can become distractions and create divisions even among the church. Because today is no different. And today is no different because the human creature is no different. But what separates us from the world is that we have a new nature. We have been transformed, and that transformed life is to be laid down and consecrated to Christ for a new purpose with new desires and a new motivation. And also it comes with a call to not be distracted. Early on in the Church of the Nazarene, we determined that if there is a particular doctrine or issues that's not really critical to our salvation, we're not going to allow that to divide us. We'll allow one another to think how they want to act or think how they want to believe. But we are going to be united in what is critical and what is important. Which is why we must never forget who we are. And we must never forget why we go. And we must never forget who it is that we are going to. And we must never forget what it is that unites us. Who is my neighbor? Within the Church of the Nazarene, we have what's called NMI, Nazarene Missions International, and NMI was created to motivate and organize the local church so that we would not lose sight of our identity and of our purpose and of our mission. What is my mission? Or better yet, who is my mission? In my 35 years of travel, I have returned from almost every single trip with a special attachment, a special love for the people to where I had gone, for that culture. I would come back and it was like, oh, I want to go back to these people. I want to learn their language. I want to live there. I just have that special love and attachment for the people and that culture. Well, about 15 years ago, when I was on a trip to Honduras, and I was struggling throughout that trip, and I began to wonder why it was that I wasn't developing this special attachment to these people like I had in all the other countries I'd been in. What was causing this to be different? And I really struggled with that. And it's not that I didn't like the people, not that I didn't love the people, but I could sense that there was a difference. I wasn't developing a special attachment for these particular people. And I kept praying to God and asking him, what's going on? Why am I not feeling this? Am I even supposed to be on this trip? And at some point, I felt that the Lord speak to my spirit and said, I don't want you to have a particular special love for any particular people. He says, I want to give you a love for people. So no matter what the country, no matter what the culture, no matter what the language, whether they're across the street or across the ocean, I want you to just have a love for people, an undying, passionate love for people in the way that you've never had it before. Because the gospel is about people. And our mission is people. Well, I'm a people too. And I live in a world where things that happen do affect me and affect my family and affect my community. And then in my 65 years of life, I am somewhat educated. I've gotten a lot of life experience, and I think I've developed a pretty decent judgment on things, and I have a strong sense of what is right and what is wrong. And I do have very strong opinions about certain social issues, and I believe that I am right in those opinions. But it's possible. It is possible that I might have wrong conclusions about current events, and that my neighbor might be right. So as a follower of Christ and as a believer who has a Wesleyan influenced theology, can I not allow my neighbor to be wrong? And can I not allow the possibility that I am wrong? And can I not, above all, seek the good for my neighbor? Let me paraphrase something that Paul wrote to the Corinthian church when he said, what good is it if I am right? Or if I am smart? Or if I am generous and gifted and eloquent and educated and handsome and successful? What good is that if I have not love? Who am I? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not self-seeking. Love always protects. And love always perseveres. And love never fails. It's never wrong. And it never goes obsolete. Love is the supreme law in the kingdom of God. It's what motivates us to pray. It's what motivates us to give. It's what motivates us to go. It's what motivates us to send people and support them when we send them. No matter what's going on around us, no matter what's going on in the world, we have a love for people, and we keep focused on that. And it's what motivates us to work together and to take the gospel, or even a cup of cold water, to our neighbor, even to a stranger. Let me close with the words of John Wesley, who wrote, "For God's sake, if it be possible to avoid it, let us not provoke one another to wrath. For how much more is love, with our many wrong opinions, to be preferred? How much more rather to have love? We may die without the knowledge of many truths and yet still be carried to Abraham's bosom. But if I die without love, what good will of having had that knowledge be to us? God forbid that that should happen to us. May He prepare us to receive the knowledge of truth by first filling our hearts with all of His love." In your mission giving, in your mission praying, in your participation or your support of mission efforts, such as a work and witness trip, if things don't turn out as you had expected or as you had hoped, yet your motivation was love, your efforts will not be a failure. And your investment in missions is safe and will produce fruit anytime your motivation is love. Our knowledge right now might be lacking, but our love can be perfect, because in that we should be united.
Thank you, Pastor Chris. Would you all thank him with me, please? Yep. When it comes to the business of giving sacrificially to help make world mission possible, I always kind of go back and forth between math, what I can afford, and inspiration, what I see other people doing, and the voice of God as best I can understand it in any given moment. Laura and I made a decision a long time ago that we would trust the Lord to take care of us, and so we would tithe as it is taught in His Word. And then from time to time, the Lord just taps us on the shoulder and tells us to give more to this or that or some person or cause. And then from the time we were first married, when we didn't have two nickels to rub together, we felt strongly that the Lord called us to the kind of giving that we're talking about in Faith Promise, where we would just say to Him, "God, I'm having a hard time buying gas. I'm having to choose when we were young between gas and groceries at times. And are you serious? You want us to give when we're in that kind of a spot?" And so we would listen to the Lord and together come up with some number that didn't matter what it was. If it was $1 more, it was more than we could afford in the day. And the Lord always just found a way to make side work or something else that made it possible for Laura and I to then give. And it was funny because it really didn't come from us. All of the extra was just something that the Lord dropped in our laps. And then we remembered, oh yeah, He gave us everything that we ever tithed on. He gave us everything that we ever gave as an offering. And so we learned somehow, young, that we could trust God with whatever He asked us to do when it came to the business of giving for the sake of His kingdom. And it's been our joy to participate in that from that day till this. So we're ready to make a faith promise pledge. Let me talk to you about how this works. You've got a little card. I hope you got one as you came in. If not, you can pick one up as you go out. And there's a place on there that says, "With faith in God to supply, I pledge to give the following for the work of world missions between now and February 28th. It says 2022. We'll make that 2023. How about that? You have more than 3 weeks to take care of this. And if you want me to figure out how to mark this for you, just put a check mark next to 3,000 and then put weekly, and then that'll no. It has all kinds of dollar amounts on there, and frankly, you can write in $1.50 if you want to, and just stick it in one of those offering boxes at the back of the sanctuary. I'm not going to recommend to you an amount. I'm not going to recommend to you a frequency. I'm just going to ask you, as an individual or as a family, to talk with the Lord and say, how would you like to use me? How would you like to grow my faith? And what would you like to make possible because my family and I will say yes to you? Pastor Rob tells me God never asks he and Marlon to go on a mission unless they're out of money. It's only then when God says, hey, I got a great idea. It's going to cost, $7,000, and you got to go somewhere where they're probably not going to let you in, but then God supplies your needs, doesn't he? And after 35 years of travel, Chris, you can probably testify that all those folks who came to you and said, how can you afford to take all these trips? The answer every time is, I can't. But somehow God makes a way because he calls you. Church of the Nazarene was born in a rescue mission. Literally, we started as a people who were drunks and opium addicts and prostitutes. And someone preached the gospel to us. And we came to know the Lord in his healing power and his saving power, his cleansing power. And he gave us a great love for other people who are suffering in the same way. And so when the denomination organized itself about 125 years ago, all these poor people said, we will place a priority on taking the gospel to the poor. It wasn't rich colonialist types in the Church of the Nazarene who said from our first days, we're committed to taking the gospel to the poor. It was the people who were 3 years out of the gutter. And so we've placed that as a high priority for our churches and for our individual lives ever since. And so wherever the Lord calls us to go, he almost always takes us to the poorest of the poor. And so if you have a heart for the poor, I would ask you to consider making a faith promise and turning in that card. We're never going to call you and say, you're not making good on your pledge or it's time to catch up. This is between you and the Lord. We just are hoping that between this Sunday and next Sunday, in promises that you make as led by the Spirit, that we can say, beyond our regular tithes and our generous offerings, this year this church wants to give $60,000 to help make it possible for Chris to go, for Rob to go, for us to go, or for some unnamed person to go. We just want to make sure that there's always money enough to go with the faith that says, yes, Lord, your church will respond every time you call us. Of course, there will be opportunities for you to go. If you'd like to talk with Pastor Chris about that district missions project to go work with people along the southern border of the U.S., you know that there are people who are homeless and refugees and in great suffering these days. And you could go be evidence of God's mercy. And I have to refrain from preaching a message here, but would you give me one paragraph? Pastor Chris read a passage to us, and after Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan, he asked the great expert in the law, who do you suppose figured out or was a neighbor to the suffering man? And the man's answer was, well, I guess it was the guy who showed mercy. So I had to look up the word because I'm a definitions person. And that word mercy means that you have a sympathy in your heart toward the suffering and a motivation to do something about it. When the Apostle Paul wrote in Ephesians, that whole business of it is by grace you've been saved through faith. Do you know how the whole passage starts? But God, in his great mercy, who had sympathy for us and our condition and a motivation to go do something about it, Can you abide your pastor saying God got off his rear and did something about the mercy that he had in his heart? And that's what he's calling us to do. Worship team is going to sing a song that'll give us some time to just listen to the Lord and see if maybe he might whisper to us a faith promise or maybe a call to go. Why don't we listen for his voice?
I surrender all. I'm living for your glory on the earth. This passion in my heart, the stirring in my soul, to see the nations bow, for all the world to know I'm living for your glory on the earth. For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me, light a flame in my soul for every eye to see. For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me. This passion in my heart, this stirring in my soul, to see the nations bow, for all the world to know I'm living for your glory on the earth. For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me, light a flame in my soul for every eye to see. For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me. For every knee to bow down, for every heart to believe, for every voice to cry out, burn like a fire in me. For every tongue to confess, you alone are the King, you are the hope of the earth, burn like a fire in me. For every knee to bow down, for every heart to believe, for every voice to cry out, burn like a fire in me. For every tongue to confess, you alone are the King, you are the hope of the earth, burn like a fire in me. For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me, light a flame in my soul for every eye to see. For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me, For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me, light a flame in my soul for every eye to see. For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me. For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me, light a flame in my soul for every eye to see. For the sake of the world, burn like a fire in me.
Pray with me for just a moment. Lord, I know you're speaking. You've been speaking to my heart this morning, You've been speaking to some folks who came and knelt at this altar, Lord, and I thank you for this precious family and these kids who are just responding to your voice. Whatever it is, Lord, that you're speaking to them, I just pray that they would make it a yes, Lord. And why don't you speak to the rest of us, and we'll make it a yes, Lord, to you. I want to talk to you for just a brief moment before we go about world mission in the Church of the Nazarene and Faith Promise's role within it. Pastor Chris mentioned that for the next couple of years anyway, our district will be partnering with the South Texas district. And listen to me closely, please. I'm speaking to you as your pastor today. You don't have to agree with what our current administration is doing about immigration. You don't have to agree with what the past administration was doing about immigration. What I have seen within my lifetime is that while the politicians stand around and argue about what's right and wrong, the Nazarenes saddle up and go about what's suffering people. You remember when a huge hurricane hit the Gulf Coast and destroyed New Orleans? It's been a decade ago. While everybody was screaming about FEMA this and President whoever that, you know what the Nazarenes were doing? Putting their boots on and taking the money that we had raised in services like this. And we went in vast numbers. And we put people in boats and we got them off of the roadside and we pulled them out of the Astrodome. And we got them food and clothing and medicine and shelter. When great horrible storms have struck Bangladesh and the United Nations is arguing about what ought to be done, the Nazarenes just went. You can go be a part of being the hands and feet of God to a people who suffer while the powers of the earth stand around and do nothing. I don't know about you, but that kind of invigorates me. Yeah. Your giving will get used in two ways. Every dollar that you give for Faith Promise will get used in two ways. Number one, a portion of it will be sent to Nazarene World Headquarters, and every penny of that that we send there goes into the World Evangelism Fund. It's for making sure that the gospel goes all around the world with a priority for the poor and the suffering. A part of it will remain in our hands here, and it will equip our local mission to reach out to the folks in our neighborhood, and the biggest portion of what we keep here will be invested in work and witness. Other teams from this church, you going and being the hands and feet. One of those trips like Pastor Chris was talking about, one of those trips like Rob and Marlon and Joyda will be taking here in the next few weeks. So part of it goes immediately, and part of it will go with you as you go to do the Lord's ministry in this world. Lord, why don't you just speak to us? It's not over today. We'll, of course, gather back here next week when we'll listen to Pastor Sosa speak to us. Lord, we're eager to hear him and to partner with what he and his people are doing. But Lord, more than anything, we want to partner with you. You've been so good to us. You've been so good to us. And so, Lord, we just want to hear from you. Whatever it is that you say to us, how many zeros, we'll write them down. And then as you make it possible for us to give, we'll make good on it. Why don't you stand with me, please? I think after you have said, please, God, the request for forgiveness, I think there's just two more words that you really need to speak to God repeatedly, and it's this: yes, Lord. Whatever it is that he asks you to do, your response is yes, Lord. And then you and he'll find a way to make it happen. So before you go today, would you just say that with me? Yes, Lord. Now, would you say it like you mean it this time? Yes, Lord, I give you the blessing of God. It has already been made yours in Christ Jesus in abundance, but I proclaim it to you today. And know this: every act of obedience, every act of sacrifice is recorded by Jesus himself, who said, great is your reward in heaven. Go in his peace.